like this. All right, let's get started. Yeah. Yep. So we can start on a drum roll, yes. Okay. So, as we do every week, we start. I'll just wrap up from some of the trades that we took last week. So, just to remind you before I start changing the radar screen. But primarily, you can see that the euro yen we're short from 115. It is now trading at 113. So that was quite an interesting move. The pound, the euro dollar is brilliant. We're short from the 143. It is now 141 something. So that was about a couple of hundred pips on the trade. The pound yen also is excellent. We had about 100 pips on the trade. The pound dollar close to 200 pips on the pound dollar trade. The dollar yen, as you can see, there hasn't been much movement in there, but it's quite an indication. And it's one of the good things that when you look at the radar screen, you can begin to gauge also. You can use it to gauge the strength and the weakness. And you can see that most of the euro has been all of it extremely weak for the all of last week. The pound was the second weakest because it's the second trading pirates. Yes, it's the second weakest currency. What's interesting also, if you look at the Aussie, we had sell signals on the Aussie across the board, except for the Aussie CAD, and the one with the least sellings or the least sell signals is the dollar. So again, it's one of the ways that we can use the radar screen so that we can see during the last week how many sell signals have been triggered, how many buy signals have been triggered, and what extent we are engaging the strength and the weakness. So for example, you see that the pound CAD is extremely weak. You can also see that the Aussie CAD is weak. You can see that the Euro CAD is also weak, and you can see, so primarily the CAD in essence is beginning or had some underlying strength. Okay, so this is just an initial gauge. So let's go back to our indices, and if we look at the dollar index, this is the weekly chart, and as you can see from last week, we have a major structure point at 75. $75.91 or $75.94. We're pretty much closed above that structure point. That is an extremely positive sign for the US dollar, and by no means we are talking anything fundamental here, but this means that we're going to begin to gauge the accumulation that was taking place last week, and we identified it last week, that's coming into the dollar. There is continuation, but this has the 75.94 has been a very difficult point for the dollar to cross above. and you can see has been trying from April the 18th, and it has also tried to cross above it in March this year. So April and March has been trying. So this is one attempt, second attempt, third attempt. So this has been extremely difficult structure point for the dollar, and therefore we need to keep our eyes this week on the indexes, and I have sent you all, or you all have how to get the indexes. If it is now during this week above the 75.94, then that could signal some serious buying power coming into the dollar and some serious short covering in the dollar, and that will put some underlying support. So the key for us, and it's quite close now, it closed 75.93, pretty much at the structure. The high probability is it should break above it. So that means that the dollar now is one of our strong, or the first pairs to look at buying. And as I was talking with Deborah earlier, we have capitulation or selling coming into the crude oil, which should give an underlying strength for the US dollar. And also gold is selling off, and silver is also slightly selling off. So that, again, these are all supportive to the dollar. If you look at the British pound, you can see that on the daily chart and the index, the pound has traded below the structure point, which is the 162.47 on the index, and we closed the week at 161.68. The low of the index was 161.39, so we're about 30 pips above that low, and this is 131. So we are sitting at this little structure point. So the pound is at a breaking point. It hasn't broken to the downside yet, but it is at the breaking point. If you look at the yen, we had a major sell signal last week. We continued to the downside, and Thursday and Friday we had a little bounce to the upside. And if you look at Friday, this day here, this is a big sell signal in conjunction with all of these. This is one sell signal, two sell signals, three sell signals, and then there was this attempt at a correction which has failed. So the high probability for the yen now is for it to continue to the downside. So we have seen some strength coming in, or some buy signals coming in to the dollar, and now we see some sell signals coming in to the yen. If you look at the Swiss franc, this is quite one of the weakest currencies that we have. I mean, when I say weak, I don't mean fundamentally, but I'm talking technically weak. And we're having, so this is a sell. We don't have any reason or any buy signal in the Swiss franc. If we look at the euro, same story as the Swiss. Everything is a sell on the euro. We don't have any buy signal, and this has been in a long on a tear, on a long liquidation, and they're just selling the euro. Last but not least, this is the Canadian, and this is the only pair that shows a buy signal. This is here a buy signal. So we do have a buy signal in the CAD, even though it's still weak, this is a structural point, so it came above it, so we can say that we are neutral on the Canadian. The Aussie, this is a very important pair. As much as we have to keep an eye on the dollar index at the 75 95, so I mean, if that is a strong buy signal, and if you look here, this is a major decision making point on the, yes, yes, I'll go back to you, I'll get you the exact number as well. This is a major sell point, I mean, on the index, because we'll get it on the specific pairs. So on this index it's 104.87, and the close, it tested it on Friday, it went all the way down to 104.79, so 87.79, the difference between the index is 10 pips, and we bounced above it and we closed the Friday at 105.43. So between that kind of setup is, we can consider it neutral, even though it's on the bigger picture it's quite bearish. We're looking for it to break to the downside. So if now I have a break on the Aussie index, we have to keep an eye on the Aussie index of the 104.87. If it breaks below that, then we're going to get major capitulation. On the US dollar, the number is 75.94. You're correct, Amzwa. So right now the dollar is on the sitting and a breakup to the upside that will give us a major buy signal, and the Aussie is sitting at a structural point to the downside that would give us a major sell signal. And it's not a trend change again in the Aussie, more it is of a long liquidation kind of thing. The Swiss, as you can see, is, we don't have any buy signals on the Swiss. The Euro, we have no buy signals on the Euro, even though we have a structural point over here we have to keep an eye on, which is around 141.13. So we're about 30-40 pips. That might, just give us like a snapback or something. And the yen, as you can see, we do have a sell signal, so we'll be looking at shorting the yen. And the same story with the British pound. So if I'm going to create my hierarchy as to strength or weakness, my first candidate to be a buyer at would be the US dollar. That would be the first buy. I would be looking at see which one we'll be looking at. The Canadian, because as I said that this is a buy signal, so it closed at 103. So the second one, the second buy one would be the Canadian. Where did it go? So the first one is the dollar. The second would be the CAD. We're going to be kind of neutral, if you will, on the Aussie. So I'm going to give it just 1 plus. It is positive, it hasn't broken, I don't have a sell signal, it is sitting right there, as you see in front of you, sitting above the 104. So again, it is not a buy. It is neutral, so I'm just going to be. I'll wait for a confirmation if I'm going to sell it, and my sell signal is quite close. And I am quite negative on the euro and on the Swiss franc. See the British pound. Same story with the British pound. So if I set it up like this, and I'm sorry, let's do the yen. The yen here, as you see, this is, as I mentioned to you, we have 4 sell signals coming in. That's 1, 2, 3, 4 sell signals, and right there, what happened on Friday, as I said, is a major sell signal. So also the yen would be quite weak, or would be one of my first choices, because that is the one that is giving me a sell signal, a brand new sell signal. So actually the weakness of the yen is actually more weaker than the euro. So the yen is actually more weaker than the euro, because it's a brand new sell signal. I mean, the signal in the yen is just happening. The euro has been selling off all of last week. The yen has just given the new sell signal on Friday. This is the new sell signal in the yen on Friday. This is the new sell signal. So therefore, we're going to give it a little bit more, a higher degree in the hierarchy, because that will be the one that's most recent, or the one that should be acting to start with. So I would be looking at buying the dollar and selling the yen. I would be looking at buying the dollar and selling the euro. I'll be looking at, I would say, buying the Swiss, also buying the dollar and the Swiss, and so I would be looking at this combination, the dollar versus most of the crosses. I will also be looking at the CAD with these crosses. I'll be looking at buying the CAD yen, the Euro CAD, selling the Euro CAD, the Euro Swiss, and the Euro pound. As far as the Aussie, we are gonna be neutral about it. Yes, I think so. And the crosses, also the crosses in the yen, that, as you can see from the pack that I showed you, that the yen now is going to be one of the major players in the coming week, because it is, as I said, it is a fresh signal, fresh sell signal, and you'll be able to see that when I go to the crosses. So we'll be looking at selling the dollar, buying the dollar yen, selling buying the CAD yen. Actually, we might be doing buying the Aussie yen, even though the Aussie is in sell signal. And the yen, the euro yen, and the pound yen, based on what I've just described, because the pound is less weaker than the yen, so we can go long the pound and short the yen. So there is a chance we can be buying the pound yen and buying the euro yen. So we should be looking at, primarily based on what I've seen, we're going to see the individual pairs in a minute. But what it seems now, I want to be going long the dollar as long as it gets above the 75.94 across the board. Dollar yen, dollar euro dollar. Short the euro dollar, go short the pound dollar, and and go long the dollar Swiss. I'm gonna stay away from the dollar CAD, because the CAD looks strong and I have a buy signal on the CAD. I'm gonna keep an eye on the Aussie dollar, because the dollar is much stronger than the Aussie. So if we have a break in the Aussie, we might get a liquidation to the downside. So that is one of the things I would be keeping an eye on. So the hierarchy, dollar is number one, CAD is number two. The weakest or the most recent sell signal is in the yen, so I'll be looking at selling the yen. And I'm looking at, you might be looking at taking maybe the pound Aussie if it breaks, and the pound Swiss. Okay, so let me stop the recording and we go to the individual pairs.